My Hero Academia's ending has been decided as Deku has finally defeated Shigaraki. However, it's all gone horribly wrong. Everything we have known so far has been a big, fat lie. With All For One returning and killing Shigaraki, claiming everything was according to his plan. But that's not all. Deku has lost One For All and his arms.
Brother, what's that?
Yes, the very body parts Deku first used to go up against the sludge monster in chapter 1, gnawing at the villain to save his boyfriend Bakugo are gone. But thank God this war is over, huh? Our boy can rest easy. Cause if Shigaraki got back up, the world would be in trouble. I mean, who's left to fight him? The frickin' tape dude? This isn't JJK, we dodged a bullet there.
Are you sure about that?
But to understand what led to this, let's rewind back a bit to when Deku first lost Danger Sense, because recently MHA has been peak fiction, baby.
I think I just peed a little.
With All For One gone due to the efforts of Bakugo and All Might, nothing stood in Shigaraki's way, as he now vowed to destroy the entire world that wronged him. He'd become so powerful that he could use decay on the world's 35th tallest mountain, Mount Fuji itself. This would have caused mass destruction on a scale far greater than any of Shigaraki's past rampages. It's safe to say that at this point, Shigaraki is a threat to the whole planet, as once decay begins, it never stops. And Deku is as weak as ever, barely keeping himself away from death, so forget about damaging Shigaraki. Like, my guy was literally using Black Whip to hold his body together. The tendrils were forcing his muscles to contract as they had lost all energy, so Deku and the One For All vestiges called an emergency meeting, leading to a last-ditch effort to transfer all the other quirks inside of One For All, giving it to Shigaraki. Now I know what you guys are wondering, but ABD, isn't giving Shiggy all the quirks gonna weaken Midoriya even more? Isn't that what Shigaraki wanted all along?
I'm confused right now, G.
Oh look, the second user gives us some specially prepared anime bullshit science. Essentially, they would be throwing the quirk at Shigaraki, which would override his subconscious and hurt his mind, allowing Deku the moment he needed to enter the vestige world and save him. You know how, let's say, you ask your friend in class to pass you the eraser and bro instead throws it at you, hitting you in the head. You get the eraser, but before you got it, that shit hurt. That's the game plan that 150 years of experience has come up with.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb!
Furthermore, this would of course mean the total annihilation of the One For All vestiges, meaning that Deku would lose all of their quirks and advice. But looking at the rubber analogy, it's probably not lost much. As the battle continues, more and more vestiges are transferred to Shigaraki, with Deku utilizing the quirks in the best way possible. This further showcases why Deku was the perfect user for One For All, as he's willing to put his own life on the line to protect others, the full essence of a hero. However, as Shigaraki eventually absorbed 5 more quirks, he became so overwhelmed, Deku finally got the chance to go balls deep into Shigaraki's vestige world. And by the time he got there, all Deku had left was the base stockpiling quirk and Nana Shimura's float. This was absolutely an intended thematic choice, as Nana would get to witness her grandson's resentment of her and the terrible life he lived, having to come to terms with her failures and entrust everything to Deku, which falls in line with MHA's central theme of passing the torch onto the next generation. Inside Shiggy's mind, we are zapped all the way back to that damn house from chapter 236, the place where it all began. Here, Deku isn't viewed as a savior, rather he's shown as a villain, which is a reoccurring sentiment stated about him. Even Shigaraki quoted this when he saw Carnage Deku in chapter 307 when he left UA. Your reality is based on perception, so this symbolizes Shigaraki's contempt towards heroes, the so-called saviors who never managed to save him. Basically, how the world views Shigaraki is how he sees the chosen #1 hero of this world he so despises. But Deku doesn't care about all that. All he sees is that lonely, sad boy who wanted to be a hero just like his grandma, especially after witnessing Shiggy's origin story firsthand, leading us to the moment right before Shigaraki has a chance to hurt his sister inside his mind. But this time, Deku stops him at the last minute, appearing as a child himself. He tells Shigaraki he wants to help him because he saw him crying, but Shigi denies Deku's help, saying that this was all his choice, that his family was murdered not by accident, because if they weren't, his existence wouldn't have been validated. How else could he explain those stained hands and justify his own hatred? But Deku gets through to him, telling Tomura to take his hand and that he's here to support him. But Shigaraki states that even if his hatred goes away, the villains still need a hero of their own, and that's his dream, which is another way he sort of parallels the first user, wanting to be a hero for people suffering, except only this time it's the ones who were wronged by society and became villains. We even see this psycho-ass kid saying, "Kill Deku!" Like, imagine you're in a war that is the whole world at stake, and your dumb-ass kid is screaming at the TV for a 16-year-old kid to die.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Meanwhile, outside the Vestige world, a storm of hands that surrounded Shigaraki during the fight start to dissipate, hinting that Deku's talk no jutsu was working. However, in this moment, things take a turn, as Deku starts to see memories of someone talking to Shigaraki's dad about Tenko himself. Deku's confused. He really thought he was about to one-shot Tomura with the talk no jutsu, but nope, as Shigaraki is still not alone, because All For One starts popping out. Now you're probably wondering, how is this thumb here again? After all, we literally saw him die. Well, there's always been two All For Ones since the first war arc. You know how all the One For All vestiges exist inside of Deku? It's not actually them for real, but rather their will stored inside the quirk. So similarly, the real All For One is finished, however the spirit of him has been waiting for the right moment to break Shigaraki's mind and take control. All For One tells Shigaraki that nothing he's ever done has been of his own will, and that his life was planned out from the moment he was born. All For One explains that he found Shigaraki's father to be easily manipulated and decided to use him to create a child as his new vessel. Shigi's sister was already too old to inherit his will, and so he literally convinced the father to give his wife more backshots just so that Shigaraki would be born. That is crazy to me. After Shigaraki was born, All For One took away the boy's original quirk and gave him a new one, Decay, which he knew would eventually let loose and cause Shigaraki to murder his entire family. But it gets even worse, as it's revealed that Dr. Garaki had modified Decay prior to All For One giving it to the young boy, as it had originally held the power to regenerate what was broken. But this factor was taken away, giving Shigaraki not only an unnatural quirk, but a quirk that could only destroy. The original quirk was, of course, overhauls. Dr. Garaki made a copy of it and gave it to All For One. This would also explain Shigaraki's neck itch, as overhaul also had an allergic reaction when getting in contact with other people. The implementation of this quirk would of course lead to Shigi's origin story and All For One finding him when nobody else did. Knowing that he had control over his own destiny was the last pillar that kept Shigaraki's consciousness alive, and with that now gone, Shigaraki disintegrates inside the Vestige world, giving All For One full control over his body. I mean, this form is still ugly as hell, but at least he's not a fat baby anymore, I guess. Now, whilst this twist is insane and something we predicted over 4 years ago, it does have a problem. This goes against the central themes of the story, destroying Shigaraki's relationship with Deku. The thing that made the
"Say the line, Bart!"
moral dichotomy between the two so interesting was how they paralleled each other. Deku was just some random kid All Might found on the street, and Shigaraki was just some random guy that got picked up by All For One. Shigaraki was meant to showcase the flaws with hero society, a physical and visual representation of its darkness and inability to save everyone. But that's completely gone now, as Shigaraki's character is basically just All For One living through him, making nothing his character did really of his own decision, and showcasing that his motivations never meant anything to the overarching story. All For One's death, while incredibly pathetic, highlighted that the next generation was taking shape. His desire of being forever in control and becoming a demon king like in the comics was destroyed by the heroes that literally defied fate to make it happen. All For One viewed Tomura and his little brother as his thing, a possession, believing being the strongest naturally meant he had the right to rule the world. By being stopped by Bakugo, someone who wasn't even a one-for-all user, showcased how flawed All For One's logic was, viewing everyone as a fly, but also how right All Might's choice to leave things to Deku and his friends was. However, I guess that just doesn't matter, as All For One is back and Shigaraki is pretty much entirely gone, with only a faint echo remaining. And because Shigaraki isn't a byproduct of Hero Society's flaws and just another pawn in All For One's plan, it honestly kinda just destroys the tone of the most important themes of the story. For example, the moral grey of things argument is completely gone and makes the story simply just black and white. A born evil psychopath who caused only harm to society for the past 150 years being the reason for the grey to exist in the first place. Like, this man controlled the entire underworld of Earth with mafias and secret organizations for centuries that all governments recognize as the #1 villain in the world. Horikoshi told us this in a throwaway page. However, a deeper message Horikoshi is trying to convey is that the grey in society occurs when dark individuals like All For One spread corruption into the light. At this point, Shigaraki finally felt like he had been somewhat saved, that he could move on and become a better version of himself, someone who could protect his comrades, only to learn that everything he fought for was never of his own free will and just some part of an evil mastermind's grand plan for world domination. Shigaraki even thought that he had broken free from the shackles of his master, as in chapter 379 he broke free of All For One's hands. His hatred for being controlled is just as potent as his hatred for heroes, resulting in his goal of destroying the world and all who wronged him. But that was all for nothing. It is all a lie. He's nothing but a tool for All For One. Society never saw him as a person because All For One didn't want them to. He went along with his master and lost his identity just so this old geezer can steal the spirit of his little brother as a quirk. However, since now that the curtain has been lifted about the true origins of Shigaraki's despair being not heroes in society but this devil incarnate, there is a slight chance that as a final act of defiance against his master, he will help the heroes from the inside. Because Deku can't even lift a finger. I mean, he doesn't even have any left. Now let's be honest with ourselves. We all knew that this was gonna happen, pretty much from season 2 onwards. Deku continued to get into incredibly tough battles, overexerting himself at every turn and gaining several scars on his hands. This reached its climax during the final fight with Shigaraki, as Deku gives in and starts to blow up his arms for the sake of stopping the villain's rampage. He knew the sacrifice he was making, and it's even mentioned during the fight that his arms wouldn't be able to handle it. I mean, the guy was literally using Black Whip to propel himself. Every other time Deku has hurt his hands, no sort of consequences ever come from it. But he's not so lucky this time. The stake that has been building up for 300 chapters has finally paid off by his new form, Handleless Deku. I mean, this has got to be up there with Six Path Sage Mode, Super Saiyan, and Gear 5. But this does beg a question, right? How the are the heroes gonna be winning this? Their literal trump card is basically out of commission, but All For One's plans are also kinda ruined, as his little bro no longer exists due to Deku's ploy to enter Shigaraki's vestige world, which means Deku shattered his lifelong dream of being one with his brother again. However, Deku isn't alone to face All For One. All his good deeds towards people in his classmates will culminate in them saving him now, as some of Deku's classmates come to his aid. Even Aizawa Sensei has come hopping through the portal on one leg. That's right, he is back. This is some Avengers Endgame level shit here, boys and girls. Now, of course, Deku isn't completely out of the fight. He is the MC at the end of the day. There's still a chance for him to regain his arms and power, and that's due to Eri. Remember, she was able to completely cure Mirio of his quirklessness, so the same should in theory apply to Deku, if only temporarily. But it also brings into the question of All Might, who Eri wasn't able to help. Remember, Mirio's quirk was never stolen, only essentially deactivated by the drug he was hit with. Deku's quirks are gone. Their vestiges completely disappeared, and so there may be no hope. But a lot of evidence does suggest that Deku will get his arms back, as in the future vision Endeavor saw, Deku did have them. The excuse of Eri being too far away doesn't even matter anymore, as Aizawa is coming out of Kurogiri's portal. Furthermore, Eri was practicing her quirk control by restoring missing limbs of bugs and lizards, a perfect fit for Deku's current situation. But Eri still hasn't accumulated enough energy ability to activate Rewind. We're reminded of this in chapter 416. However, an alternate scenario could unfold. Remember Dabi's confrontation with his family? The emergence of powers at the moment of near death, as witnessed there, could play a pivotal role. This will lead to a change in decay, allowing it to revert to its original state with the ability to reconstruct. This means it can not only repair itself from within, but also restore Izuku's arms. Essentially, this restoration is all Deku would require to resume fighting with his arms, given that he likely retains a residual amount of One For All's power, similar to All Might's situation after transferring it. Now, to enjoy even more peak fiction, find out who is the strongest Saiyan in Dragon Ball Super, and whether or not they could really defeat Handless Deku.